Hey guys, it's Godbars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 120th episode of my series, where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it had, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. While any somewhat frequent watcher of the channel probably knows the reverence that I hold Billy Woods in, I realize that it's been way too long since I've actually talked about one of his projects. I was considering his stellar album a few years back that was in collaboration with More Mother, but then decided to save LPs like Brass, Hiding Places, Haram, or Maps for another time, so that I can instead discuss the LP that really got the ball rolling on Billy Wood's expansive modern solo career, History Will Absolve Me. While I've mentioned multiple times how Today I Wrote Nothing is my personal favorite album of Billy's, as well as the first one I heard in its entirety, I initially became aware of Billy through this 2012 classic, partly through the memorable album cover, as well as the impactful title inspired by the Fidel Castro quote. But he also started registering on my general rap radar through how much praise and attention this album was rightfully earning at the time. Some fans who are only more familiar with his work post History Will Absolve Me may not be aware just how long Woods has been active in the New York underground. He already had a couple insanely impressive albums through the Superchron Flight Brothers name, which was a duo he formed with fellow MC Privilege, which to my knowledge only ended due to Privilege virtually just disappearing from public view. However, this was arguably a key event to inspiring Billy's first solo release here, as well as pairing up with Elucid to form an arguably even better duo, Arm& Hammer. However, even that mid to late 2000s output wasn't his introduction to the game, as he had already had two solo albums that I believe both came out in 2004, those being The Chalice and Camouflage. They're both definitely essential listening material for any die-hard Billy Woods fan, and the latter of the two actually heavily features Vortal Mega of Cannibal Ox. And hearing him rap alongside Billy is a real treat that any fan of either act should check out. Vortal actually has a feature on the very last track on History Will Absolve Me, but for some reason it doesn't seem to be on streaming services or any of the playlists of the album on YouTube from what I can tell. There's also another track featuring Open Mike Eagle that also didn't make the final cut, but I know you can hear that one on the fully restored version on the Backwoodz Bandcamp page. What's really interesting is even with 20 years of growth and experience, you can still find many of the traits he'd later excel with on his early work in spades. His voice is obviously more youthful, and his fluent style isn't quite as patient and studied, but his knack for dark, poetic, and imagery-filled lyricism is palpable, and it's endlessly admirable how Billy came out with this distinct style and just worked on it and honed it for decades until the rest of the world caught up. He didn't attempt to make some poppy radio hit to get his foot in the door and then do what he really wanted, and he didn't switch to faster and more flashy flows or dumb down his writing to make it more accessible. He wouldn't even give you much of an identity to latch onto, as the average artist will have an Instagram full of selfies and tries to get their face plastered on every billboard, while the only Billy Woods fans who know what he looks like are the ones of us who've actually seen him in person. Of course, if you're a shitty fake fan, you can probably search enough and find a picture from another fake fan online who broke the unspoken oath by going out of their way to photograph his face and then share it online. I don't know how anyone can be enough of a loser to think that's a cool thing to do. That's basically the equivalent of a quote-unquote MF Doom fan who then goes out of their way to try to snatch the mask off his face and ruin the illusion. If you really love Billy and his work, you shouldn't be searching for what he looks like without a censor bar or mask over his face, as his face being constantly obscured is more than just an artistic choice, it's a personal one. And you listening to his music doesn't give you some sort of authority over that. I think the slow but gradual rise this dude has had is one of the best examples of why people who complain about how whack modern rap is are just embarrassing themselves. They speak out of ignorance because they think Ice Spice is the embodiment of modern rap, so as I mentioned before, they flood any pre-2010 hip-hop video or song with comments of, "This is better than the music they put out nowadays. None of them can rap and it all sounds the same." None of those goobers can name anything remotely comparable to Billy Woods or Elucid, and honestly, if they were less lazy and actually spent about 2 minutes reading the lyrics to any song of his, they'd probably feel bad that they tried to say how mindless and uninspired all current hip hop is. Billy is one of those artists who crafts a specific experience tailored to each project he does, but the theme isn't usually very simple or straightforward. Probably the most direct concept you can glean from any album of this before throwing it on is Today I Wrote Nothing, as the title pretty concisely sums up the inspiration behind that LP, or I suppose in this case a lack of inspiration. History Will Absolve Me can seem somewhat vague at first glance, but once you actually delve into this masterpiece, you quickly learn that Woods has much more than a cursory knowledge of both African American history and just US or world history in general. Even though these themes and ideas are conveyed through his trademark dense and coded lyricism, the more you listen to this thing, the more you realize that nothing is random or just thrown in for padding. He'll go from songs that criticize other rappers in the industry at large, like DMCA, to ones where he's painting a vivid picture of a despicable father and the selfish motives that go into that sort of deplorable mindset on Bill Cosby. Every single track has something to say, and not one song goes by without Billy having multiple quotable lines, which get enhanced even further through the noisy, experimental, and at times pretty unsettling instrumentals, which to this day is arguably the most explosive set of beats he's ever rapped over, with these beautifully chaotic bangers that I'm sure fellow fans of alternative acts like Death Grips or Clipping would at least appreciate, if not heavily enjoy. Those instrumentals set the backdrop for Billy to weave some of his most poignant and poetic verses, to the point it's unusually hard to even just choose one to quote from. However, I decided to go with the ending track on most versions of this album, unless you count the Body of Work remix that technically closes out the track list. But regardless, it's a stellar cut with probably my favorite beat Willie Green has ever laid down. Billy must have thought so too, because he saved his most personal and heartfelt verses for this one, leading us in with I stand in this booth in a moment we call now, at the same time pedaling to school as a child, under a canopy of jacarandas. It ain't changed much. Colorful trees still surround us, ells get touched. Baby faced, staring out the window of a school bus, 20 years later, same wistful look, but shackled up. Bearded down, Mama kissed his forehead, good luck, tears anoint the crown. He lied to her anyway that night and toasted over pounds. Sterling, whispers and whirlwinds, Polaroid pictures, edges curling. At the auction, the contents of one storage space, sight unseen. Going once, 16, 17, cracking Philly blunts. Half the smarts, but twice the heart. Look at the picture, eyes had a spark. Sputterin' at the bar mutterin', money comes and goes, broke today, but tomorrow, who knows? 10 years ago, she was just some hoe. 5 years after that, I'm in love. If you ask me today, I could give a fuck. Go figure. The remaining verse is just as potent, so I want to share just a little bit of that one as well. That being, sorry I ain't make the wake. Yeah, I know, $1 short and 24 hours late. Trying to live my whole life in 98. Your mom's watching me clean my plate, but there ain't no seconds. I'm at the ATM emptying my check-in. I'm 11 years old, firing a weapon. Dad's hand on my shoulder, smoke in my nose. Got older, went from chocolate to dro. I just love how throughout this entire song, you can vividly picture all these events he's describing, and it's as if he's giving us the privilege of looking over his shoulder as he flips through this auditory scrapbook. This album hasn't aged a minute. This is one of those rare classics that I genuinely feel could come out today and grab just as much, if not more, attention and praise. And a large part of that is the soundscape created by talented producers like Willie Green, AM Breakups, Marmaduke, Man Morris, and another veteran of the East Coast underground scene, Uncommon NASA, or NASA as he used to be known in his old Def Jux days. There's also a good amount of quality guest appearances outside of the couple I named at the front end of the video from the likes of Mark Specht, Masai Bay, John Classic, Loren, Elucid, and one of the godfathers of this whole minimal drum wave in New York, Rock Marciano. For honorable mentions, as stellar as this thing is, I'd have to trim it down to The Man Who Would Be King, Body of Work, Famous Last Words, Human Resources, Blue Dream, Pompeii, Nigerian Email, Duck Hunt, and Pump Up the Volume. It took some deliberating, but for my three favorite songs overall, I finally settled on Crocodile Tears, The Foreigner, and The Wake. Thank you for watching my 120th video. Next time, we're going to talk about a group that made their name in the 90s, but then came together for one final send-off album in the mid to late 2010s. So look out for that one, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite moments off an LP that's filled with highlights are. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Alright.